Hey everyone, off the Mike Sports Network here. We are one game away from the wild card round being completed. But the big story of the weekend, the best game of the weekend, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers fall to the Washington Commanders. I'm calling them the Cardiac Commanders. The Cardiac Commanders do it again. 23-20, a doinked field goal by Zane Gonzalez, former Brown, in this game with Baker Mayfield and just a bunch of former. It's amazing how everything goes back to the Browns. I joke about this with my dad all the time. Um, but what I want to talk about here is the Cardiac Commanders here because listen, I think a lot of people have taken what I've said in regards to the rookie quarterback class and Jayden Daniels and Caleb Williams. I do think Jayden Daniels is a very good quarterback, and he has showed a lot of poise and composure and a lot in a really, really tough spot. And he's a big reason why this Commanders team is in a position to now go to the number one seed Detroit and, maybe pull off a miracle run. And do I think that they'll win? Not likely, but anything is possible, especially with this kid at quarterback. And um, I'm not listen, he's going to win rookie of the year. And we've seen this before with RG3. I think this is a little bit different than for what RG3 was about a decade ago. Jayden Daniels, I think, is built to thrive. What's going to be really interesting to monitor is how long Cliff Kingsbury's there, because once that offense goes away, I wonder if this is going to continue to translate as well as it has. He has been built for the moment. Um, but there are things that I've noticed that he does have to get better at. There are weapons there in Washington. One thing that I will completely dispel is somehow how the Chicago Bears situation was better for Caleb Williams to walk into than what was going on in Washington. If Caleb Williams there, y'all would be shouting from the moon tops about how great Caleb Williams is with Cliff Kingsbury. Like, this was a tailor-made situation for whoever walked into that situation. Dan Quinn's a really good coach. Cliff Kingsbury is a really good offensive coordinator. They brought in a veteran, Bobby Wagner, on the defensive side. You bring in Austin Eckler on the offensive side. You've got a veteran receiver in Terry McLaurin, who I love to death, a former Buckeye, who's just a stud and finally get some real quarterback play. Like, they've got pieces there in Washington. Just because Daniel Snyder just dragged this franchise down under its previous names doesn't mean that this was a bad situation to walk into. That's what I'm trying to say about Jayden Daniels. But it also makes this team hell of entertaining. And I think it's a win for the NFL that the Commanders are playing for another week. I love the Bucks. I love that story with Baker Mayfield, but they shat themselves in this game. Like, they had opportunities to pull away in this game, made a goal line stop, fumbled the ball away. Then they had a botched snap count that cost them potentially a touchdown, and then they get a field goal kicked on them in the final minutes. I'll have another video about what I think about a couple of different aspects of the Bucks coming out here later on in the day or in the week, just really to reflect on this weekend and wild card stuff. But really, when it comes to the Commanders, um, I think that this is their ceiling. I do think that they could potentially go to Detroit and win. But Detroit with a week off, they're a juggernaut. It's going to be really hard to potentially pull that off. But if anybody's going to do it, it's this rookie quarterback. But don't get it lost. If the roles were switched and Jayden Daniels went to Chicago, I don't think Jayden Daniels is nearly as successful as he would be in Washington. If you flip these things, like, that's what bothers me and why everybody's just jumping to conclusions. Like, Jayden Daniels is a great quarterback, but he's also in like a situation and in a scheme and a system that he's set up for success. Chicago is a fucking mess. Their ownership is still the same. They kept a head coach who they shouldn't have kept. Like, there's a bunch of stuff that was going wrong there. So anybody who wants to just, like, beat Caleb Williams down, like, I could literally point to the same thing in Denver with Bo Nix. I like Bo Nix. Do I think Bo Nix would be successful in any other situation outside of Denver? No. I think he went to the perfect situation in Denver. So I think we need to judge these situations differently, but if we're talking about just purely talent and Caleb Williams was the number one player in this draft, and whether Chicago squanders it or not is irrelevant at this point, because like it's like, you know, we're talking about who is the best guy in this draft. And it's like, on performance, yes, it's Jayden Daniels. Like, we went through the same thing with Trevor Lawrence, like in that draft. Then Zach Wilson goes too. And obviously, Trevor Lawrence kind of panned out after a little bit, but he's kind of, it's all about organizational structure and whatnot. And Washington, an organization that had not been structured for a while, hadn't won a playoff game in 2 decades. They've now won one because they found a quarterback that fits them well, because, hey, the guy that they probably would have taken was taken number one. And then you have a perfect offensive coordinator, you have the perfect coach, you have personnel there, you bring people in, and it works out. So like, this has been a whole, cohesive thing, similar to what happened with Lamar Jackson in Baltimore when he got drafted in 2018. It's the same thing. Like, I'm not trying to discredit this guy. I'm just trying to tell you guys that this whole narrative that everybody pushed back on me a few weeks ago, where I said that I still think Caleb Williams is better. Yes, you got to look past the numbers, okay? And just because they had a bad season, they only won 5 games this year, it doesn't mean that anything changes, because they were a Hail Mary away from beating this team on a miracle Hail Mary at the end of that game of early on in the season. So that's my thought on the Cardiac Commanders. They go to Detroit. We'll have a lot on the divisional round, the best round of the playoffs, coming up later in the week. I'll see you guys soon. Bye bye.